The richest man in the room opened a 6-year-old boy's lunchbox, and somehow that was the moment my life stopped belonging only to me. At 5:37 on a Tuesday morning, I was standing in the Whitmore family kitchen arguing with a pancake. The pancake was losing. So was I. Butter hissed across the griddle. The commercial coffee machine groaned behind me. The enormous copper clock above the pantry insisted that I was already 4 minutes behind schedule. The kitchen itself was larger than my entire apartment. It had 2 marble islands, 3 ovens, and enough polished steel to reflect every questionable decision I had made since waking up. In the center of it all sat a pancake shaped like a rocket ship. At least that had been the plan. One wing was darker than the other, and the nose had folded over as though the rocket had reconsidered space travel. "You still have potential," I whispered, sliding the spatula beneath it. "Do not embarrass me in front of a first grader." My son, Owen, sat at the breakfast counter wearing dinosaur pajamas beneath his unzipped school hoodie. He was coloring Saturn purple because, according to him, space needed better management. "It looks burned," he said. "It looks brave," I corrected. "There is a difference. It looks brave because it survived being burned?" "Exactly." He considered that with the seriousness only 6-year-old children and Supreme Court justices could manage. "Then I want the brave one." I smiled despite the ache behind my eyes. I had slept for perhaps 4 hours. Owen had awakened twice after dreaming that his classroom hamster had learned to drive, and I had spent 20 minutes at 2 in the morning explaining why this was unlikely but not technically impossible. By dawn I was running on coffee, maternal instinct, and the kind of optimism people often mistook for energy. On the left side of the island, I arranged Owen's lunch in a bright blue rocket-shaped box. The brave pancake went in first, followed by apple slices cut into stars, a small container of maple syrup, baby carrots, and a carton of chocolate milk. On the right side, I prepared Grant Whitmore's breakfast in a dark navy thermal case, embossed with the family crest. 2 perfectly poached eggs, sourdough toast, roasted tomatoes, black coffee in a silver travel mug. Nothing sweet, nothing playful, nothing that suggested breakfast might be enjoyed instead of endured. Grant Whitmore had returned to the family estate 3 weeks earlier to prepare for a major hotel acquisition. In those 3 weeks I had learned exactly 4 things about him. He was 29 years old. He wore suits that probably required their own insurance policies. He spoke so quietly that everyone else lowered their voices to hear him. And he never ate breakfast. Every morning I sent food with him. Every afternoon, it returned untouched. His coffee came back empty. The food came back looking insultingly perfect. I told myself that I did not care. A cook should not take rejection personally. A cook should prepare, present, and move on. Unfortunately, I had always believed food was a conversation, and Grant Whitmore had been leaving me without an answer. My telephone buzzed against the counter. The school application announced that Owen's class needed 12 empty paper towel rolls by Friday. Before I could process why first-grade education required industrial quantities of cardboard tubes, Owen reached for his milk and knocked it across the island. "Freeze," I said. He froze. The milk did not. It streamed toward the edge, straight for Grant's folder of breakfast meeting notes, which his assistant had delivered 10 minutes earlier. I lunged with a dish towel and stopped the spill less than an inch before it reached the documents. At that exact moment, the house manager appeared in the doorway. "Emily, Mr. Whitmore's car is waiting." "Of course it is." I wiped away the last streak of milk while Owen called from behind me. "Mom, my note." I stopped. Every school day, I placed a message in Owen's lunchbox. Sometimes it was a joke. Sometimes it was a reminder. That morning, knowing he had to give a presentation about the solar system, I had written, "Big days need small courage. Love, Mom." I tucked the folded note into the blue rocket lunchbox, zipped both bags, and set them side by side. The house manager cleared his throat. I grabbed one of the bags and handed it to him. "Please tell Mr. Whitmore that the eggs are best within 20 minutes. His expression suggested that informing Grant Whitmore of an egg deadline was not included in his contract. "I will mention it." He disappeared down the corridor. A moment later, the distant front door closed with the soft, expensive finality of a bank vault. I turned back to Owen. "Shoes. I am wearing socks." Shoes are the ambitious cousins of socks. He slid off the stool and shuffled toward the mudroom. I packed his backpack, found one missing sneaker beneath a chair, signed a reading log that I was almost certain had been due the day before, and checked the clock. We had 9 minutes to make a 12-minute drive. Normal Tuesday. Completely manageable. Then Owen returned holding the dark navy thermal case embossed with the Whitmore crest. "Mom," he said, "why does my lunchbox look like a company?" The room went silent. Not literally. The coffee machine still hummed. The refrigerator still clicked. Somewhere upstairs, a vacuum cleaner started. Inside me, however, every sound stopped. I looked at the navy case in Owen's hands. Then I looked at the empty space where the blue rocket bag had been. Oh no. Owen unzipped the case. Inside sat 2 poached eggs, roasted tomatoes, sourdough toast, and a silver napkin ring worth more than my monthly grocery budget. He stared down at it. "This is not a brave pancake." "No." "Did the serious man take my lunch?" "Yes." "By accident?" I closed my eyes. "Very much by accident." I made Owen a peanut butter and strawberry sandwich in less than 2 minutes, added a banana and a fresh carton of milk, and drove him to school while imagining the many creative ways a person could be dismissed from employment. 45 minutes later, on the 47th floor of Whitmore Hospitality's Manhattan headquarters, Grant Whitmore sat at the head of a glass conference table surrounded by 12 executives, 3 attorneys, and a presentation concerning hundreds of millions of dollars. I learned the details later from his assistant, Claire Bennett, who told the story with the cautious expression of a woman still uncertain whether she had witnessed a disaster or a miracle. Grant reached for his breakfast without looking. He opened the zipper. He lifted the lid. Beneath the cold white lights of the boardroom sat a crooked rocket pancake with 1 burned wing, 6 apple stars, a carton of chocolate milk, and a yellow note written in purple ink. One executive laughed before realizing that nobody else had. Grant looked around the table. The laughter ended. Then he unfolded the note. "Big days need small courage. Love, Mom." For several seconds he said nothing. His thumb rested against the word courage as though the paper had become unexpectedly heavy. Claire moved to take the lunchbox away, already apologizing for the mix-up, but Grant placed one hand over the lid. "Leave it," he said. Then the man who had returned every breakfast untouched for 3 straight weeks picked up the burned rocket pancake, took 1 bite, and kept eating. By 10 that morning, I had convinced myself that losing my job might not be the worst thing that could happen to a person. It was not a convincing argument. After dropping Owen at school with his hastily packed replacement lunch, I drove back to the estate while imagining every possible version of my dismissal. In one version, the house manager handed me a formal letter. In another, Victoria Whitmore appeared in person and explained that competent employees did not confuse billionaire heirs with first graders. The third version involved Grant saying nothing at all, which somehow felt worse. Silence was his most expensive skill. When I returned to the kitchen, the blue rocket lunchbox was still missing, and its absence seemed brighter than anything else in the room. I cleaned the griddle twice. I reorganized the spice drawer. I peeled 6 pounds of potatoes that nobody had requested. Every time a car passed the windows, my shoulders tightened. Shortly after noon, Claire called. "Miss Parker, Mr. Whitmore has asked that you remain at the estate this afternoon." I stared at the potato in my hand. Was I planning to leave? He wanted to be certain. Am I being dismissed? There was a pause. He did not say. That was not comforting. Did he eat anything? I asked before I could stop myself. Another pause followed. This one felt different. Everything. The knife shifted against the cutting board. Not enough to hurt me, but enough to make me freeze. Everything. The pancake, the apples, the carrots, and the chocolate milk. He drank the chocolate milk. Through the straw. I pressed my lips together because laughter felt dangerous. "Thank you for the detailed report." "There is one more thing," Claire said. He kept the note. The call ended, but I remained there holding the same potato for nearly a minute. I should have felt relieved. Instead, curiosity began pushing through my fear. Grant Whitmore had returned 3 weeks of perfect breakfasts without touching them, yet he had eaten a pancake that looked as though it had survived an emergency landing. Something about that made no sense. At 3:15, A black sedan rolled beneath the stone archway in front of the estate. I heard it from the kitchen. The low hum of the engine. The soft closing of a car door. Footsteps crossing the marble hall. Slow. Precise. Unhurried. I wiped my hands on my apron and reminded myself that a man was only a man, even if his family name appeared on buildings from Manhattan to Boston. Then Grant entered the kitchen carrying the blue lunchbox. He had removed his jacket, but his tie was still perfectly straight. Nothing about him suggested that he had spent the morning eating a child's breakfast in front of 12 executives. Except the lunchbox. It looked almost absurd in his hand. Bright blue plastic. Red rocket fins. A yellow moon sticker Owen had placed on the side. Grant set it on the island between us. You packed this. It was not a question. Accidentally. I gathered that. I am very sorry. His expression did not change. Are you? I sent a senior executive into a major meeting with chocolate milk and a pancake shaped like damaged aerospace equipment. Yes, I am sorry. His eyes lowered to the lunchbox. For half a second, I thought I saw the edge of something almost human in his face. Not amusement exactly. Recognition, perhaps. Then it disappeared. Why was it burned? He asked. Of all the questions I had expected, that was not one of them. It was not burned. He looked at me. One side was black. One side was brave. That does not answer the question. I folded my arms. Owen wanted a rocket. I was making your breakfast at the same time. His milk spilled. Your car arrived early. The rocket lost a wing. Life continued. Grant studied me with the concentration he probably used on financial reports. You gave it to him anyway. Of course. Why? I glanced toward the windows. Afternoon sunlight lay across the counters in long golden strips, warming the flour dust near the mixer. Because children should not learn that imperfect things belong in the trash. The room became very quiet. Grant's thumb moved over the edge of the lunchbox. And the note. Owen had a presentation today. He becomes nervous when everyone looks at him. So you write to him. Every day. Even when nothing important is happening. Especially then. His gaze shifted to the folded paper resting beside the lunchbox. My father used to leave notes in my school bag, he said. The words were so quiet that I nearly missed them. It was the first personal thing I had ever heard him say. I waited, afraid that any response might close the door he had opened. He stopped. I asked. Grant looked at the note rather than at me. He died when I was 9. There was no drama in his voice. No invitation for sympathy. Only a fact polished smooth by years of repetition. I am sorry. People usually are. Something in that answer felt colder than indifference. Felt practiced. Before I could decide what to say, he closed the lunchbox and slid it toward me. Make the same breakfast tomorrow. I blinked. The same breakfast? The pancake. The apples. And the note. He paused. You do not have to include the note. I do not write personal notes to adults I barely know. Then omit it. And you want the pancake burned? Brave, he corrected. I stared at him. There it was again. That almost invisible shift near his mouth. Grant Whitmore was teasing me. Either that or the world had tilted while I was peeling potatoes. This is not some unusual punishment. Would making breakfast be an unusual punishment for a cook? You have not eaten anything I made for 3 weeks. His expression closed again, but not before I saw the truth land. That was not about your cooking. Then what was it about? He looked toward the formal dining room beyond the kitchen, where a table long enough for 20 people sat beneath a chandelier nobody turned on before dinner. Breakfast, he said, has never been my favorite part of the day. The back door opened before I could ask anything more. Owen hurried in, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. He was followed by Mrs. Alvarez from housekeeping, who picked him up from school on the afternoons when my shift ended late. The arrangement had been approved when I accepted the position, although Victoria had made it clear that Owen was to remain in the staff areas of the house. Mom, I got all the planets right except Mercury, but Mrs. Daniels said my purple Saturn showed creative confidence. He stopped when he saw Grant. Then he noticed the lunchbox. His eyes narrowed. Owen walked to the island and inspected the empty containers one by one. You ate all of it. Grant looked down at him. I did. Even the carrots? Yes. I do not eat all the carrots. I noticed there were a great many. Owen placed both hands on his hips. That pancake was for my presentation. Your mother mentioned that. It had courage in it. Grant glanced at me, but I refused to rescue him. This was his negotiation now. Owen stepped closer. Did you steal my courage? I believe it was packed by mistake. That is not the same as giving it back. Grant considered him for a moment, then loosened his tie as if the conversation required more preparation than a corporate acquisition. What would you consider fair repayment? Owen answered immediately. You have to make me another one. I covered my mouth with one hand. Grant looked at the griddle, then at the spatula, then back at my son. I do not cook. Owen shrugged. Neither did I when I was a baby. For the first time since I had met him, Grant Whitmore looked completely unprepared. He looked at me, perhaps expecting assistance. I raised one eyebrow. Slowly he turned back to Owen. Tomorrow morning, he said, I will make it again. Grant arrived in my kitchen at 5:30 the next morning wearing a charcoal suit, polished shoes, and the expression of a man preparing to negotiate with hostile breakfast food. I was measuring flour when he entered. Owen sat at the island in his school clothes, swinging his legs beneath the stool, and watching the doorway with the focused anticipation of someone expecting either a miracle or a disaster. You are late, Owen said. Grant checked the silver watch at his wrist. It is 5:30. Mom starts at 5. Your mother is a professional. You said you would make the pancake. Grant looked at me. I lifted my coffee mug and took a slow drink. This was not my debt. Where do I begin? He asked. Owen pointed toward the sink. Wash your hands. Grant removed his suit jacket and placed it over the back of a chair. Then he took off his watch, set it carefully beside the mixing bowl, and rolled his sleeves to his forearms. The movement was so precise that I suspected he had practiced looking competent before entering. Unfortunately for him, pancake batter did not respect preparation. 1 cup of flour, I said. Grant reached for the measuring cup. Level or compressed? Level. How level? Grant, this is breakfast, not structural engineering. Owen leaned toward him and whispered loudly. She becomes impatient when people ask smart questions before coffee. I heard that, I said. I know, Owen replied. Grant measured the flour with the concentration of a surgeon. He added baking powder, sugar and salt, then cracked an egg against the bowl. Half of the shell went in with it. He stared at the floating pieces. Is that supposed to happen? Only when the chicken seeks revenge. I handed him a spoon. He removed the shell fragments one by one while Owen watched with growing concern. The milk went in next. Then the melted butter. Grant stirred too quickly, sending a cloud of flour across the counter and the front of his shirt. He stopped. I pressed my lips together. Owen did not bother. He laughed so hard that he nearly slid off the stool. Grant looked down at the flour covering his expensive shirt. I assume this is amusing. Very, I said. Should I change? You can. The pancake may respect you more if you wear another shirt. He looked at me for a long second, then returned to the bowl. I will take my chances. I turned on the griddle and showed him how to test the heat with a drop of water. It danced across the surface. Now pour slowly. Make the center first, then the nose, then the wings. His first attempt looked like a circle that had lost confidence. Owen tilted his head. That is not a rocket. It is the foundation of a rocket, Grant said. It is a potato, Owen replied. Grant tried again. The second pancake had wings, but one was twice the size of the other. When he attempted to flip it, the pancake rose into the air, turned once and landed on the floor. Silence followed. Grant stared down at it. Owen stared down at it. I leaned against the counter because my knees had suddenly become unreliable. Do not laugh, Grant said. I laughed. Not politely. Not quietly. The sound escaped before I could contain it, warm and helpless, filling the kitchen until tears gathered in the corners of my eyes. Grant watched me as though I had done something more surprising than allow a pancake to land on the floor. People usually became careful around him, They measured their words, straightened their backs, and waited for permission to breathe. I had done that too when he first arrived. Standing there with flour on his shirt and a failed rocket at his feet, however, he did not look like the heir to an empire. He looked like a man who had never been allowed to be bad at anything. "I apologize," I said, still smiling. "No, you do not. Not even slightly." Something shifted near his mouth. A small curve. Almost a smile. "Again," he said. The third attempt stuck to the griddle. The fourth folded in half. The fifth survived the flip but emerged shaped like a boot. Owen inspected it carefully. It could be a rocket if space had cowboys. Grant placed both hands on the counter. "How many attempts did your mother need?" "She has been practicing since before I was born." "That is not an answer." "7, I said. Owen looked at me. "You told me 3. Mothers." Edit history. Grant poured one final circle of batter. This time he moved more slowly. He made a narrow nose, 2 uneven wings, and a small flame at the bottom. The edges turned golden. When he slid the spatula beneath it, his shoulders tightened. "Do not think about it," I said. "Just move." He flipped it. The pancake landed in the center of the griddle. One wing bent slightly, and the nose was too round, but it remained intact. Owen climbed down from the stool and approached as if Grant had just returned from the moon. "That one is acceptable," he announced. Grant exhaled. "Acceptable. In an emergency." I placed the pancake on a plate, added apple stars, and poured maple syrup into a small cup. Grant carried the plate to the island himself. Owen took one bite, chewed thoughtfully, and nodded. "The courage is back." Grant sat across from him. He did not speak, but his face softened in a way I had not seen before. For the next 20 minutes they discussed planets, school presentations, and whether hotels should have secret tunnels for children. Grant answered every question seriously. When Owen left with Mrs. Alvarez, he waved from the doorway. Grant lifted one hand in return. The kitchen felt strangely empty afterward. "You are good with him," I said. "I made a pancake." "You listened." Grant looked toward the door through which Owen had disappeared. "Most adults do not. Most adults are waiting for children to stop talking. My mother preferred silence." The words came without bitterness, which somehow made them sadder. Before I could respond, Rose Whitmore entered wearing a blue silk robe and fuzzy slippers shaped like sheep. She surveyed the flour, the ruined pancakes, and Grant's abandoned jacket. "Finally," she said. "Evidence that someone lives here." Grant stood. "Grandmother, it is early. I am 78 years old. Every hour is early and possibly valuable." She sat beside him and stole the surviving half of his pancake. "This is terrible." "I made it," Grant said. Rose took another bite. "Then it is historic." After that morning, Grant began coming to the kitchen almost every day. Sometimes he helped. Usually he read reports while Owen colored beside him and I tested recipes. Rose joined us whenever she pleased. The staff began lingering near the coffee pot. Laughter returned to rooms that had forgotten the sound. Grant never tried to force himself into those mornings. He always paused at the doorway first, as if waiting to see whether the invitation still existed. One morning, Owen was practicing his solar system presentation again. Grant's telephone rang twice during the explanation. He silenced it both times. "You can answer that," I told him. "Owen has not reached Jupiter yet." The answer should not have mattered as much as it did. Powerful people were always telling others that they mattered. Grant did something rarer. He stayed. Later that morning, he placed a fresh cup of coffee beside my cutting board. 2 teaspoons of sugar. A small amount of cream. Exactly the way I drank it. "You remembered," I said. "You prepare meals for everyone in this house. Someone should remember yours." For one unguarded second, I wanted to place my hand over his. I did not. Instead, I held the warm cup and watched him return to Owen's collection of purple planets. That was the first morning I understood that my feelings for Grant had changed. They had not arrived dramatically. They had gathered quietly, like sunlight moving across a kitchen floor. Several days later, Grant tasted a cinnamon pear French toast recipe I had been developing and asked who had created it. I did. He placed his fork down. The Chicago hotel preview needs a family breakfast menu. That sounds like a problem for your executive chef. I am asking you to create the pilot menu. I stared at him. I am a family cook. You understand what families remember. The offer frightened me because I wanted it. I would control the menu. Completely. My name would remain attached to the concept. Yes. Owen would not be used in any advertising. He would not be involved at all. I studied his face. There was no hesitation. Then I will do it. A cold voice came from the doorway behind us. Absolutely not. Victoria Whitmore stood beneath the carved arch, dressed in cream from collar to heel. Her gaze moved from Owen's crayons to Rose's coffee cup, then settled on me. Employees do not sit at the family table, she said. Grant rose slowly. Victoria did not look at him. She looked only at me. And they certainly do not forget where that table ends. Victoria did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The entire kitchen seemed to straighten around her, from the polished copper pans to the staff members suddenly finding urgent reasons to disappear through other doors. Even the morning light felt less welcome. Grant remained standing beside the island, one hand resting near Owen's crayons. Emily is developing the pilot breakfast menu for Chicago, he said. Victoria removed her gloves one finger at a time. Emily prepares meals for this household. She created the concept. Then the executive team can refine it. I had spent enough years working in wealthy homes to recognize that kind of sentence. Refinement remove my name. Improvement make it expensive. Professionalize meant allow someone with a better suit to take credit. I wiped my hands on my apron. Mrs. Whitmore, Grant asked me to create the menu, and I agreed under specific conditions. Her eyes moved toward me with perfect calm. Mr. Whitmore. Excuse me. You refer to my son as Mr. Whitmore while you are employed by this family. Owen looked from her to Grant. But everybody calls him Grant in the kitchen. Victoria's expression did not move, but Grant's jaw tightened. Owen, I said gently, please take your backpack to Mrs. Alvarez. Did I say something wrong? No, sweetheart. Grant answered before I could. You said something honest. Owen gathered his crayons slowly. Before leaving, he looked at Victoria. The table is big enough, he said. Then he walked out. Rose lifted her coffee cup as though offering a silent toast. Victoria waited until the door closed. This arrangement ends today. No, Grant said. One word. Quiet. Final. Victoria turned to him. You are allowing affection to interfere with judgment. I am recognizing talent. You are confusing the two. I should have remained silent. I knew that. I also knew silence was the currency of that house, and I had never been good at saving it. You do not have to like me, I said. But you do not get to decide that my work has less value because I wear an apron. Victoria regarded me for several seconds. Confidence is admirable, Miss Parker. Confusing access with belonging is not. Then she left. Her heels faded across the marble hallway, each step measured in cold. Grant looked at me. The Chicago project is still yours. Your mother does not agree. She does not control the project. Rose took another bite of pancake. Victoria has never needed control written on paper. She prefers people to surrender it voluntarily. Grant ignored the warning. I will have the legal department prepare a limited development agreement. My name stays on the pilot concept. Yes. Owen stays out of it. Completely. I studied his face again, searching for hesitation. There was none. Then I will do the work. For the next 2 weeks, I built the pilot menu between school pickups, estate dinners, and Owen's renewed campaign to convince Grant that every hotel needed a telescope. I created cinnamon pear French toast, maple oatmeal served in small cast iron bowls, build-your-own pancake boards, and a simple grilled cheese breakfast that Rose declared worthy of national recognition. Grant tasted everything. He asked questions. Real ones. Not the kind powerful people asked while waiting for their own opinions to return. He wanted to know why certain smells reminded people of home, why children trusted food they could assemble themselves, and why imperfect shapes felt warmer than identical ones. Somewhere between the third menu meeting and the sixth ruined pancake, I stopped waiting for him to become bored with us. That was my mistake. The photograph appeared on a Thursday morning. It showed Grant in the boardroom holding Owen's blue lunchbox, his expression serious while the red rocket fins pointed toward the ceiling. Someone had posted it online with the caption, "The Whitmore heir brings his inner child to a billion-dollar meeting." By noon, millions of people had seen it. By 2, news sites were calling him unexpectedly relatable. By 4, the company's public relations department had developed a campaign. Claire showed me the proposal in Grant's office. Bright photographs filled the screen. Child actors laughing over pancakes. Parents writing notes. A polished version of the rocket lunchbox, redesigned with the Whitmore logo. Across the top were the words, "Small courage, big mornings." My stomach turned cold. No, the public relations director smiled as though I had misunderstood. This could become a national family initiative. Hotel packages, school partnerships, and branded meal kits. That message belongs to my son. The phrase itself is not legally protected. The campaign uses actors and contains no identifying information about your child. That does not make it yours. Grant closed the folder. The campaign is over. The director blinked. "We have already received strong positive engagement online. Then inform the market that we changed our minds. The board will object. They can object to me." He looked at me. Nothing moves forward without Emily's written approval. I believed him. That was my second mistake. 3 days later, Victoria asked me to meet her in the library. She stood beside the windows with a tablet in her hand. "I assume Grant told you he stopped the campaign." "He did stop it." She handed me the tablet. On the screen was a final production authorization for the lunchbox, the slogan, hotel advertising, and promotional videos featuring paid actors portraying a mother and child. At the bottom was Grant's electronic authorization. I read it twice. This cannot be right. The launch begins tomorrow night at the Chicago Hotel Preview. He promised that Owen's words would not be used. My son has made many promises during moments of enthusiasm. He would have told me. Victoria's expression almost softened. Would he? Or would he wait until the campaign became too valuable to refuse? I wanted to reject every word. Then I saw the date. The system showed that Grant's authorization had been applied that morning. What I did not know was that, 3 years earlier, Grant had approved a blanket marketing authorization during an aggressive period of company expansion. It allowed Victoria's office to release time-sensitive campaigns that had already passed. Legal review. Grant had never withdrawn it. The system therefore treated Victoria's approval as his own. I knew none of that while standing in the library. All I saw was his name. The hotel preview began at 7 the next evening. Grant had asked me to attend as the creator of the pilot menu, and for the first time in years I bought a new dress. It was dark green. Simple. Mine. The ballroom glittered with glass lights and camera flashes. Photographs of my food covered the walls, but my name appeared nowhere. Then the main screen illuminated. A polished version of Owen's blue lunchbox rotated beneath the Whitmore logo. Small courage, big mornings. Guests applauded. I found Grant near the stage. "You authorized it." He looked confused. "Authorized what?" I held out the printed document. His eyes moved across the first page, then sharpened. "Emily, I did not approve this. Your name is on it. This came through an old authorization. I can explain." Then explain why my son's words are on a product. Victoria watched us from across the room. At that moment, I understood that everyone had expected me to remain grateful, quiet, and useful. I untied the white apron the event staff had asked me to wear over my new dress. I folded it once and placed it in Grant's hands. Then I set the blue lunchbox on top. "I can work for your family," I said, keeping my voice steady, "but I will not allow your family to own my son's story. Emily, please." I opened the lunchbox. Inside was a single yellow note written in purple ink. Grant read it as I stepped away. "Kindness is not branding." Grant called me 11 times before midnight. I watched his name illuminate my telephone from the kitchen table, each vibration sliding across the wood like a question I was not ready to answer. Owen was asleep in the next room. His blue lunchbox sat beside me, empty except for the smell of maple syrup and the faint purple mark left by the note I had removed. Outside our apartment window, Traffic moved through the wet streets in long ribbons of red and white. Inside, everything felt still. I wanted Grant to have an explanation. I wanted the authorization to be invalid, the campaign to be a mistake, and Victoria to be exactly as wrong as I had always suspected she was. Wanting those things did not make them true. At 12:14, Claire sent me a message. She did not ask me to call Grant. She only wrote that he had left the hotel and gone directly to the company office. I turned my telephone face down. By 7 the next morning, every screen in Manhattan seemed to be showing the same image. Grant stood beneath the Whitmore logo while the words "Small Courage, Big Mornings" glowed behind him. News anchors called it a charming new direction for the company. Online comments praised the mysterious mother, whose note had softened the famous Whitmore air. Nobody used my name. Nobody used Owen's name either, which should have relieved me. Instead, it made the entire thing feel cleaner and colder. We had been turned into a story without being allowed to exist inside it. At 8:30, Grant entered the executive conference room carrying 3 things: the campaign authorization, the yellow note I had left in the lunchbox, and the original menu binder I had created for the Chicago preview. Claire later told me that he did not sit at the head of the table. He remained standing. Victoria was already there in a pearl gray suit, speaking quietly with 2 board members. The public relations director sat near the screen with reports showing increased bookings, strong positive engagement online, and projected revenue from branded meal kits. Grant placed the authorization on the table. Who approved this? The public relations director glanced at Victoria. Victoria did not look away from her son. The company did. That was not my question. Your authorization is valid. I rejected the campaign. Verbally, she said, after the legal department had already approved the materials. Grant looked down at the electronic authorization. It was attached to his name because, in a legal sense, the old delegation permitted it. 3 years earlier, during a rapid expansion project, he had granted Victoria's office authority to approve time-sensitive marketing documents that had already passed legal review. He had never withdrawn that authority. He had also never imagined that she would use it against someone he trusted. You knew I rejected this, he said. I knew you were distracted. Victoria folded her hands. I protected the company from a temporary emotional decision. You used a child's private words. I used a phrase with commercial value. It belongs to Owen. It is not legally protected. The room became silent. Grant opened my menu binder. Pages of handwritten recipes, food sketches, ingredient costs, and notes about family memory covered the table. Apple stars for nervous children. Warm oatmeal served in small cast-iron bowls. Pancakes with imperfect shapes because children trusted food that looked made by human hands. Every idea had been mine. Every story had been Owen's. Grant turned toward the screen. Remove the campaign. The public relations director shifted in his chair. We have already received national interest. Advance bookings increased 14% overnight. Cancel it. The financial loss could be significant. Then calculate it accurately. One board member cleared his throat. Grant, there may be a compromise. We can credit Miss Parker as a consultant and offer her a participation fee. Grant looked at him. She did not ask to be paid for her silence. Everyone has a number. That belief is the reason we are here. Victoria stood. Do not confuse guilt with leadership. Grant picked up the yellow note. Leadership is accepting the cost of a decision before forcing someone else to pay it. Then he handed Claire a prepared statement. He had spent the night writing it. The statement announced that Whitmore Hospitality had launched the campaign without the creator's informed consent. It identified me as the sole creator of the Chicago pilot breakfast concept. It declared that none of my recipes, words, or personal story would be used without a new agreement approved by me and an attorney of my choosing. It also promised that no phrase or personal detail connected to Owen would appear in any commercial material. The board reacted all at once. Questions. Objections. Warnings about contracts and investors. Grant listened until the room exhausted itself. Then he raised one hand. The noise. Stop. The campaign ends today. Victoria's voice remained calm. And if the board refuses? Then the board can remove me. That was the moment the meeting changed. Until then, Everyone had assumed that Grant was negotiating. He was not. He was drawing a line and placing himself on the expensive side of it. An emergency vote was scheduled for noon. During the hours before it, Grant ordered every advertisement removed from the Chicago hotel. He instructed the legal department to return full control of the pilot menu materials to me. He canceled the meal kit production agreement and authorized compensation for the vendors affected by the decision. Claire warned him that the board could suspend him from executive duties. His company car, corporate credit cards, travel accounts, and executive apartment were all connected to his position. Grant signed the cancellation orders anyway. Losing the company frightened him. Becoming the kind of Whitmore who could turn a child's trust into a product frightened him more. At 12:42, the board suspended him from executive duties pending an independent review of both his judgment and Victoria's use of delegated authority. Victoria did not vote against him. She abstained. Somehow that hurt him more. "You are risking your inheritance for a woman who left without hearing you," she said after the others had gone. Grant closed the menu binder. "She left because nobody in this family taught her that hearing us would make a difference. She is an employee. She is a person. You will regret this." Grant looked around the conference room at the polished glass, the silent city, and the chair his father had once occupied. "Perhaps," he said, "but the regret will belong to me." He left the building shortly after 2 with the blue lunchbox and no driver waiting at the curb. Claire offered to arrange a car. He refused and walked 6 blocks in the rain before taking a cab to the executive apartment. The board had not ordered him to leave. He was legally permitted to remain there during the review. Grant packed 1 suitcase and left anyway. He later told me that staying in a home provided by the company would have made his decision feel temporary. He needed to know whether he could live without the things he had been using to define himself. At 7 that evening, Rose called me. She did not defend him. She did not ask me to forgive him. "Claire told me what happened at the vote," she said. "Grant finally chose something that could not be forced to choose him back. I thought you should know." After we ended the call, I stood beside Owen's bed and watched him sleep beneath a blanket covered in planets. Grant had protected Owen's words. He had protected my work. He had done it after the damage, but he had done it publicly where the cost could not be hidden. At 8:38, my apartment buzzer sounded. I looked through the front window and saw Grant standing beneath the weak yellow light outside the building. Rain darkened the shoulders of his coat. A suitcase rested beside him. In both hands, he held the blue rocket lunchbox. He looked toward my window, but he did not press the buzzer again. For the first time since I had known him, Grant Whitmore was not arriving with authority, an offer, or an answer. He was standing outside with nothing powerful enough to make me open the door. I opened it anyway. Grant stood in the hallway with rain on his shoulders, his suitcase beside his shoes, and the blue lunchbox held carefully in both hands. Without the estate, the driver, or the perfect office behind him, he looked younger. Not weaker. Just honest. "I did not approve the campaign," he said. "I know that now. I should have withdrawn the authorization years ago. Yes. I should have protected your work before anyone had the opportunity to take it. Yes." He accepted the word without defending himself. "I should have understood that my family name could be used against you, even when I believed I was helping." Yes. His gaze remained on mine. "I am sorry." There was no explanation hidden inside the apology. No request for immediate forgiveness. No attempt to make Victoria carry all the blame. That mattered. Behind me, Owen appeared in dinosaur pajamas. He looked at Grant's suitcase, then at Grant. "Did you get kicked out?" Grant glanced at me. "No. I chose to leave. For stealing the lunchbox idea. For refusing to let anyone steal it." Owen nodded as though this made complete sense. "You can come inside. Mom made grilled cheese." "Owen," I said. "He looks hungry." Grant did. That was the problem. Not only for food, for something I was still afraid to offer. I stepped aside. He entered carefully, as if our apartment were more important than any ballroom he had ever crossed. He did not comment on the narrow hallway, the second-hand couch, or the radiator that clicked every 12 seconds. He sat at our small kitchen table while Owen brought him a paper plate. For several minutes none of us spoke. Grant ate the grilled cheese slowly. Then he placed a thin folder on the table. "This is not a contract," he said. I did not touch it. "What is it?" "A preliminary framework for an independent family restaurant concept. Your name. Your recipes. Equal ownership if we both choose to proceed. Full creative control over the kitchen. And your company? Not involved. Your mother? Not involved. Your money? Some of it. Not enough to control the business or you." I almost smiled. "You have learned something." "I am trying." I opened the folder. It contained no signature pages. No pressure. Only a proposed structure, projected costs, and a note stating that I should choose an independent attorney before any formal agreement was drafted. "I will have someone review this," I said. "You should." "I am not signing anything tonight." "I did not expect you to. You do not get forgiveness because you lost a board vote." "I know. You do not get a place in Owen's life because you made one correct decision." "I know that too." He nodded as though each boundary made the room safer rather than smaller. Owen climbed onto the chair beside him. "Did you bring anything in the lunchbox?" Grant looked at me, then opened it. Inside was a pancake shaped like a rocket. It was too thick in the center. One wing was smaller than the other. The nose had burned almost black. Owen stared at it. "That is very bad." I made 6 attempts. "This was the best one?" "Unfortunately." Owen took a bite. He chewed with great seriousness. "It has some courage." Grant laughed. Not the restrained almost smile he allowed himself in the estate kitchen. A real laugh. Warm. Surprised. Human. I looked at the man sitting beneath our flickering kitchen light, eating from a paper plate while my son criticized his pancake, and I finally understood what had changed. Grant had spent his entire life entering rooms where everyone made space for him. This was the first room where he had arrived with nothing but the hope that we might invite him to stay. I placed 3 clean plates on the table. "Before we discuss the proposal," I said, "we eat breakfast." Grant glanced at the clock. "It is 9:15 at night. Breakfast is not a time. It is a second chance." Owen pushed the brave pancake toward the center of the table. I cut it into 3 uneven pieces. Grant took the smallest one without being asked. Trust did not return that night. It returned in small pieces. It returned when Grant sent every document to the attorney I selected without questioning the changes she requested. It returned when he attended Owen's school presentation and sat in the last row so my son would not feel watched by someone important. It returned when he began taking the subway to our menu meetings, even after the company offered to restore his car. It returned when he asked before entering my kitchen. It returned when he listened to the answer. The independent review lasted 3 months. The board concluded that Victoria had acted within the technical limits of an outdated authorization, but against Grant's direct instructions and the company's ethical standards. Her delegated authority was revoked, and she stepped down from all operational roles. Grant was invited to return as Chief Executive Officer under new governance rules that required independent approval for campaigns involving employee stories, family narratives, or personal creative work. He accepted the position only after the rules were adopted. By then, the restaurant proposal had become real. We spent months testing recipes, reviewing leases, and arguing about chairs. Grant wanted elegant walnut seating. I wanted chairs children could spill syrup on without causing a financial emergency. We compromised. That became our pattern. Partnership became friendship. Friendship became trust. Trust became something quieter and more frightening. One evening, after Owen had fallen asleep beneath the table during a late menu test, Grant helped me carry him to the couch. He placed a blanket over my son and remained kneeling beside him for a moment. "I do not know how to do this," he said. "Run a restaurant? Belong to people." I looked at him beneath the warm kitchen light. "You do not belong to people by being perfect. I am beginning to understand that. You belong by staying honest when leaving would be easier." He stood. "Then I would like to stay." This time when I placed my hand over his, I did not pull it away. 9 months after the lunchbox mix-up, the first Parker and Whitmore restaurant opened in Chicago. My name appeared on the menu beneath the words created by Emily Parker. Owen's note appeared nowhere for sale. The restaurant used no family slogan, no imitation lunchbox, and no manufactured story about a mysterious mother. Did not need one. Families came because the food was warm, the tables were welcoming, and children were allowed to order pancakes in shapes that rarely survived the griddle intact. Victoria did not attend the opening. Rose arrived wearing bright blue shoes and ordered 2 servings of cinnamon pear French toast. Claire brought a stack of flowers from the Whitmore staff. Grant spent most of the morning carrying coffee, clearing plates, and pretending not to be nervous. Owen stood beside the open kitchen and watched him deliver a badly shaped rocket pancake to a little girl celebrating her 7th birthday. "She is going to complain," Owen whispered. The girl looked at the pancake and smiled. Grant glanced toward us. I gave him a small nod. He smiled back. By then, he had returned to the company, but he no longer allowed the company to decide who he was. He divided his mornings between board meetings and our restaurant. He still ruined pancakes occasionally. He still listened to Owen's long explanations about space. He still remembered how I drank my coffee. And he never entered our kitchen without asking whether there was room at the table. There always was. I once thought I had changed Grant Whitmore's life by packing the wrong lunch. The truth was simpler. I had handed him something he had never been allowed to keep as a child. A small mistake. An imperfect meal. A message that asked nothing from him. He had been born to inherit an empire. But family was the first thing he ever learned to earn.